Gang, there is no way to say this without sounding paranoid. So let me acknowledge up top, I don't have any proof. I do not know what happened. But the reality is we live in an oligarchy by any definition of oligarchy. That's the United States. Billionaires, the ultra wealthy, have influence on who gets elected and what policies they pass. Greater influence, one might argue, than you or I. That's an oligarchy. Another oligarchy you might be familiar with would be Russia, where Alexei Navalny, Putin's opposition, was just assassinated, where his campaign manager was just beaten with a hammer, similar to how Nancy Pelosi's husband was beaten with a hammer. Where Prigozhin, one of the oligarchs, was just assassinated after having defied Putin. Russia is another example of an oligarchy. Now in the U.S., when one of the oligarchs is in danger, somebody who was going to testify against them was just found dead by an apparent suicide.
Welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion. Last week on Cold Fusion, we uploaded an episode on how Boeing went from an innovative engineering company to a corporate husk designed to enrich investors. It was greed at the cost of safety, and in the worst cases, it cost lives. Now, it seems like the chickens have finally come home to roost for Boeing. In just a week since the episode was published, a series of incidents have taken place that can only be described as alarming. From a wheel falling off a plane during takeoff and dish soap being used in a production facility to the death of a whistleblower. Boeing's 2024 is not going well. In this episode, we'll see what's taken place since the last episode, look briefly into some of the claims made by John Barnett, and figure out what's next for Boeing. Just a note, I am traveling at the moment and using a different microphone with no soundproofing, so apologies in advance. To Florida on a Boeing 737-900 witnessed, quote, bright orange flames shooting out of the plane's engine. Passenger Elliot Trexler described hearing a loud noise while in the air. Quote, there was a loud explosion. There was no question in any of our minds that something bad had happened. That combined with the plane nosediving and seeing flames. Then, on March 8th, a Boeing 737 MAX, operated by United Airlines, carrying 160 passengers and 6 crew members, slid off the runway while landing due to a malfunction in the landing gear. In the very same week, a tire fell off a Boeing 777 shortly after takeoff from San Francisco Airport. It detached while the plane was in midair and fell to the ground below, smashing into cars in a parking lot nearby. And just a few days ago, at least 50 people were injured due to a sudden plunge on a Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner. This was during a flight.
Super quick, let's talk about neoliberalism. The reason neoliberalism doesn't work is because it is, in its essence, the idea that capitalism should be totally unregulated, as deregulated as possible, and that all things are best decided via the free market. However, the U.S. is fundamentally built on well-regulated capital, meaning that these punks need to follow safety procedures. They need to be held to certain standards of operation. But we have existed for the last 30, 40 years with both parties being full-on neoliberal, meaning both Democrats and Republicans. We always knew Republicans would do the worst possible thing in any given scenario. But in this scenario, also Democrats are doing it. They are rolling back regulations, ensuring that American safety standards have fallen below the rest of the world. Now, if you're on an American flight, you're in danger. If you're riding on an American train or an American train goes through your town, you're in danger. If it was built in America, it could have been built to harm you. As long as it's cheaper to harm you than not. That's what was done. This is neoliberalism at work. Boeing seems to have run afoul of some of the few rules that still exist to keep capitalists in check. Remember, they will kill you, your family, and everyone who knows your name if it makes them a nickel. They do not care about you. No one who owns one of these companies gives a solitary fuck about you, your family, really the suffering of any creature at all, human or otherwise. They do not care. They're the closest an atheist has in their belief system to demons. They don't have souls. So, with that in mind, there was a whistleblower that was in the middle of testifying. Here's what happened.
And frequency. In all fairness, investigations into these incidents are all ongoing, and we may find that some of the fault lies with the operators, as opposed to being a Boeing issue. And while there may be some truth to that, there's one person who definitely didn't believe that.
One, this is not a 737 problem, it's a Boeing problem. And I know the FAA's gone in and they've done due diligence and inspections to assure that the door plugs of the 737 are installed properly and the fasteners are torqued properly. But my concern is, what's the rest of the airplane? What's the rest of the condition of the airplane? And the reason my concern for that is, back in 2012, Boeing started removing inspection operations off their jobs. So it left the mechanics to buy off their own work.
That was John Barnett in an interview with TMZ about a month ago, and he was talking about the door plug situation with Alaska Airlines. John Barnett was a 62-year-old former Boeing employee turned whistleblower. He worked as the quality manager for over 30 years, and after his retirement in 2017, he's been publicly sounding the alarm and sharing his concerns about Boeing's practices.
He was quality control. And note that what he was saying right then was contrary to what Boeing was saying. Boeing was saying it's not a Boeing problem, 737 problem. John here was saying, no, I worked for him. This is a Boeing problem. For example, says he, for example, they got rid of the people whose job it was to check that the engineers did their job and said, oh, nope, it's just now it's on you guys. You guys have to check yourselves. In other words, they did not give a damn about anyone's safety. Nobody on the plane, nobody in the area where the plane would crash. They sat down, they did the math, and they said it's cheaper for us to risk all these people's lives and occasionally lose a plane than it is to build these things safely. This guy was in court testifying to that fact. Was.
I say John was a 62-year-old man because unfortunately, just as he was about to testify against Boeing the next day, John was found dead of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. His lawyers only found out because he was a no-show for the lawsuit and wasn't answering his phone.
This morning, police in Charleston, South Carolina tell NBC News they are aware of the death of a former Boeing employee turned whistleblower. 62-year-old John Barnett found dead on Friday from what the coroner calls an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound.
As of the making of this episode, police are still investigating his death. Barnett has appeared on Netflix, TMZ, and has worked with other journalists where he continuously claimed that Boeing's practices were not up to standard. For example, in 2019, Barnett spoke with the BBC and revealed that workers were constantly under pressure and have been, quote, deliberately fitting substandard parts to aircraft on the production line. He also claimed that there were serious problems with oxygen systems, the assembly process, failed tests, and overall mismanagement. He'd mentioned that he'd raised concerns with his managers, but no actions were taken.
And on and on. You get it. He was talking about this company's lack of safety precautions. Hey, maybe he did kill himself. Maybe he, the day before he was supposed to testify, he decided now's a good time. Maybe there was something going on in his life that we don't know about. Maybe. There is almost no amount of investigation that will make me fully confident that that is the case. So what I am going to ask you to help me demand, the South Carolina Attorney General, is that there be enough of an investigation that I can be confident that the government is not helping to cover up a murder. Again, I don't know what happened, but I have a sinking suspicion that what the plan is at the moment is for investigators to take the temperature, see that people aren't really paying attention to this, and say, well, he wasn't one of the ruling class. He was speaking out against the ruling class. Is that really a murder? Well, sure, we saw some evidence that this might have been suspicious. But if we choose to look into that, what might we find? We might find a whole can of worms that we don't care to look into because we have brown people to harass, because there's graves in Mississippi that need filling. And that's really what we're here for. That's my concern. I'm just advocating that we keep them on their toes. I'm just advocating that we inform them that we are watching. Now, I know this is Charleston police that are handling this. I say we go all the way up to the South Carolina Attorney General. Contact them directly and tell them directly we expect a full investigation into this, a thorough investigation to this incredibly suspicious death. Links in the description.